Welcome back to ABA Chapter Chat. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something super important for anyone working in ABA.
Yeah.
Whether you're working directly with clients or leading a team as a supervisor, and that's supervisor accountability.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because it's so often misunderstood.
It is.
You hear accountability and people immediately jump to blame game.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it's really not about that.
Okay, so if it's not about pointing fingers, then what is supervisor accountability all about?
It's about recognizing the connection between a supervisor's actions and their staff's performance.
Okay.
And it's about taking ownership of the fact that the quality of your supervision directly impacts the quality of services your team delivers.
Okay, so you're saying it's the supervisor's responsibility to make sure that their team is providing quality services.
Exactly. And ultimately that impacts client outcomes.
Right, because if the staff aren't providing quality services, then the clients aren't going to make progress.
Exactly.
So it's almost like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
If we imagine the supervisor as the center of the ripple, their actions spread outward, influencing their staff and then ultimately reaching the clients.
Yeah, I like that visual.
Yeah.
And it's not just about correcting mistakes when they happen.
Right.
It's about proactively setting your team up for success through effective training,
Okay.
support, and feedback.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who might be newer to the fields of ABA, can you explain what we mean by direct support staff? What are we talking about when we say that?
Direct support staff are the folks who are working directly with the clients,
Okay.
implementing the behavior plans and strategies we develop.
Gotcha.
They're the ones on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
putting ABA principles into action.
Okay, so they're the ones actually teaching new skills,
Yes.
managing challenging behaviors, and collecting data on client progress.
You got it.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is.
So we really need to make sure they're getting the support they need from their supervisors.
Absolutely.
So I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but where do we even begin with all of this?
Yeah.
Is there some kind of roadmap for building supervisor accountability?
There is. The Evidence-Based Supervisory Protocol
What is that?
is a great place to start.
Okay.
It outlines 7 steps that supervisors can use to ensure they're providing high-quality supervision.
7 steps.
7 steps.
What are they?
It starts with identifying the client's desired outcomes.
Okay.
Then you figure out what your staff needs to do to help the client reach those outcomes.
Okay.
From there, you train your staff in those specific skills.
Got it.
Monitor their performance, provide support for things they're doing well.
Okay.
Correct anything that's not quite there, and then continuously evaluate both staff performance and client outcomes.
So it's not just about training staff and then hoping for the best.
Yeah.
You're saying there's this ongoing cycle of monitoring, supporting, and adjusting based on what you observe.
Exactly. And that's where the flexibility of the protocol comes in.
Right.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
I see.
Each situation, each staff member, each client is unique. So supervisors need to adapt these steps based on what they're seeing in the real world.
So it's more like a toolbox than a checklist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got these 7 tools at your disposal.
Right.
And you need to know which tool to use and how to use it effectively depending on the situation.
I love that analogy. I think that's really helpful.
Good.
Can you give me an example of how a supervisor might need to adapt these steps?
Let's say you're working with a staff member who's brand new to ABA.
Okay.
They're fresh out of school,
Okay.
eager to learn, but maybe a little unsure of themselves.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
In that case, you might spend more time on the training and support steps,
Okay.
really breaking things down and providing lots of positive feedback.
But what if you've got a seasoned staff member who's been doing this for years but suddenly starts making mistakes or slipping up on certain procedures?
Right. In that case, you might start by carefully monitoring their performance.
Okay.
To try and pinpoint where things are going wrong.
Okay.
Are they struggling with a specific skill? Are they feeling burnt out or overwhelmed?
Right.
Once you've identified the root of the problem, you can then tailor your approach to address it.
Okay.
Maybe they need some refresher training, or maybe they need some additional support to manage their workload.
I see what you mean about this protocol being flexible.
Yeah.
You really have to use your clinical judgment and your knowledge of your staff to make it work effectively.
You do.
And that's where the concept of supervisor accountability really comes in.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility for making sure you're providing the right kind of supervision for each individual on your team.
Exactly.
But let's be real. It's not always smooth sailing. What happens when a supervisor runs into roadblocks? I mean, it's easy to talk about providing amazing supervision.
Right.
But what about those situations where staff just aren't performing well no matter what you do?
That's where things can get tricky, and unfortunately, it's where we sometimes see supervisors falling into what we call the cop-out attitude.
Cop-out attitude. That sounds a little ominous.
It is.
What does that mean?
It's essentially when a supervisor throws their hands up and says, my staff just doesn't care.
Oh, wow.
They know what to do, but they just won't do it. There's nothing more I can do.
I bet a lot of our listeners have heard that kind of talk before.
Oh, for sure.
What other kind of landmines are out there for supervisors?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is when executive personnel interfere with the supervisor's work.
Ooh, that sounds tough.
Conflicting instructions from higher-ups, scheduling decisions made without any input from the supervisor, or even showing favoritism to certain staff members.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster. I can imagine how demoralizing it would be to have your authority constantly undermined like that.
Absolutely.
So we've got meddling executives. What else?
Another tough one is working in an agency with a predominantly negative management style.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, in these types of environments, management might be quick to jump to disciplinary action.
Okay.
Without taking the time to understand the context of the situation.
Yeah.
There's a lack of trust and support.
Yeah.
And it creates a culture of fear and blame.
It sounds like a very reactive approach rather than a proactive one.
Exactly. And that kind of negativity can really trickle down and impact staff morale, making it even harder for supervisors to maintain a positive and productive work environment.
So we've got executives interfering, negative management styles. Yeah. Anything else supervisors should be prepared for?
Sometimes the challenges come from outside the agency altogether.
Okay.
Think about external events that can negatively impact staff morale, like negative media coverage of the field or even lawsuits. These are things that are completely outside of a supervisor's control. Yeah. But they can still have a huge impact on their team's well-being and performance.
So it's really important for supervisors to keep all of this in mind when they're thinking about accountability.
It is.
Because it's easy to just blame the staff when things aren't going well, but there are often so many other factors at play.
There are.
And effective supervisors need to be able to recognize those factors.
Yeah.
And find ways to support their staff.
Yes.
Even when things are tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's tempting for sure. But here's the thing.
Okay.
Even when faced with these kinds of challenges, there are still things effective supervisors can do to stay grounded, support their staff, and create a pocket of positivity amidst the chaos.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some strategies?
One key strategy is maintaining frequent and open communication with their staff.
Okay.
Especially during times of uncertainty.
Right.
Transparency is crucial even if you don't have all the answers. Just acknowledging the situation and letting your staff know that you're there to support them can make a huge difference.
I could see how that would help build trust.
Yeah.
And alleviate some of the anxiety that comes with these types of situations.
Absolutely.
But what about those times when everything feels like it's falling apart around you?
Yeah.
Is it even possible to create a positive work environment when you're dealing with so much negativity from above?
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not impossible.
Okay.
There's a really helpful mindset supervisors can adopt.
Okay.
We call it the piece of the pie attitude.
Piece of the pie. I like it already. Tell me more.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Even if you can't control everything that's happening in the larger agency, you can still control your own little corner of the world.
Okay.
Your team, your supervision, the environment you create for your staff, that's your piece of the pie.
Okay. So it's about focusing on what you can control.
Yes.
Even when things feel chaotic and out of your hands.
Exactly. And there are tangible things you can do to cultivate that.
Okay. Like what?
Well, for starters, stay consistent with your supervisory practices.
Okay.
Continue to provide clear expectations, offer support, monitor performance, and give feedback, all those essential elements of good supervision we talked about earlier.
So it's about being a steady presence for your team, even when everything else feels like it's in flux.
Right.
When things are uncertain, people crave consistency and predictability.
Yes.
And having a supervisor who's still there doing their job effectively can be incredibly reassuring for staff.
Absolutely.
And don't forget the power of positive reinforcement.
Oh, yes.
Even small gestures of appreciation can go a long way in boosting morale and fostering a sense of camaraderie.
For sure.
So celebrate those small wins. Maybe bring in some donuts for the team, or write a heartfelt thank you note to a staff member who's going above and beyond.
Those little things can make a big difference.
Yeah, they really can. And you know what?
When you persist with these effective supervisory strategies, even in the face of adversity, it often makes your staff appreciate you even more.
That makes sense.
Because they see that you're not giving up on them.
Right. They see that you're still there for them.
Exactly.
Even when things are tough.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got frequent communication, consistent supervisory practices, positive reinforcement, anything else supervisors can do to stay afloat in those stormy seas.
Remember that communication is a two-way street.
What does that mean?
It's not enough to just send out information to your staff.
Okay.
You also need to be actively listening to their concerns, validating their feelings, and providing support.
So it's about creating a space where staff feel safe to voice their concerns and know that they'll be heard.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Good.
If people feel like their concerns are being dismissed or ignored, they're going to be less likely to trust their supervisor and less likely to be motivated to do their best work. And by fostering that kind of open communication, you're not just addressing individual concerns, you're also building trust and creating a more resilient team.
That's right.
A team that can weather those storms together.
I like that.
This has been so insightful.
Good.
It's really shifted my perspective on what it means to be an effective supervisor, especially in challenging situations.
I'm glad to hear that.
But I can't help but wonder, even with all these great strategies, how do supervisors stay motivated themselves?
That's a great question.
It's easy to talk about providing support and being a positive force.
Yeah.
But burnout is a real thing.
It is.
How do supervisors avoid getting sucked into the negativity and maintain their own enthusiasm for the work?
That's such an important question because you're right, burnout is a real threat, especially in a field as demanding as ABA.
Right.
And when supervisors are burnt out, their ability to effectively support their staff is compromised.
Exactly. So let's talk about supervisor self-care. What are some strategies supervisors can use to keep their own batteries charged and prevent burnout?
One strategy that's proven to be really helpful is setting specific achievable goals for yourself and then celebrating when you reach them.
Okay, so set a goal and then celebrate when you reach it.
Exactly.
I'm all for celebrating wins.
Great.
But sometimes it's hard to even find a win to celebrate.
Yeah, I hear that.
So how can supervisors set themselves up for success with this goal-setting strategy?
It all starts with choosing a goal that's meaningful to you.
Okay.
And aligned with your values as a supervisor.
Okay.
Maybe it's something like providing positive feedback to each staff member at least once during the week. Or maybe it's about setting aside dedicated time each day to review data and provide individualized support to your team.
Okay.
Whatever it is, make sure it's something that will genuinely make you feel good when you achieve it.
So it's not just about checking boxes. It's about choosing goals that will actually make a positive impact on your team.
Exactly.
And on your own sense of fulfillment as a supervisor.
Right. And then here's the key.
Okay.
When you reach that goal, take the time to celebrate.
I love that.
It doesn't have to be anything big or fancy.
Yeah.
Maybe you treat yourself to your favorite coffee or take a long walk in nature or spend some time doing something you love that's completely unrelated to work.
Right.
It's about acknowledging your accomplishment and giving yourself permission to feel good about it.
I love that it's about incorporating self-care into the process of achieving your goals.
Yes.
And it makes so much sense. When you feel good about yourself and your work, you're going to be a better supervisor, a better mentor, and a better advocate for your team.
Absolutely.
It's like that old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
You have to take care of yourself in order to effectively take care of others.
That's so true.
You know, we've been talking about supervisor accountability.
Yeah.
And we've talked about what it means and, you know, all the challenges that come with it.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also talked about a lot of strategies that supervisors can use to be successful.
Absolutely.
Even when things are tough.
For sure.
So I'm wondering, for those listeners who are maybe still kind of wrapping their heads around all this, what would you say is like the one key takeaway about supervisor accountability?
I would say the biggest takeaway is ownership.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that your staff's performance is a reflection of your effectiveness as a supervisor.
Oh, okay.
And it's about taking responsibility for creating a work environment where everyone can thrive.
Yeah, so it's not about being perfect. It's not about knowing everything.
Yeah.
It's just about being willing to learn and grow.
Exactly.
And to always be working on improving your skills as a supervisor.
That's right.
So for all of our listeners out there, whether you're a supervisor or direct support staff, how can you apply this concept of supervisor accountability to your own work?
That's a great question, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about that. So head over to our social media channels, ABA Chapter Chat, and let us know what you think.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into supervisor accountability.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you learned a lot and that you'll join us again for our next deep dive.
See ya!